For this session, I wanted to be hopefully kind of free-flowing if I could. Based on who's on here, if you have specific questions, we can pretty much jump into anything that you would like to cover. Some suggestions were around the creating and sharing of quick marks and rubrics, drilling into the originality report, and possibly going over PureMark in more detail. But I'm happy to cover or jump into anything that you're interested in looking at within Turnitin Feedback Studio. So I guess I was curious, Mark and June, what are you feeling like you most want to see right now? Do you have any other suggestions or anything you'd like to look at?
So I'm going to answer you by voice. Sorry, I'm kind of doing three things at a time. I actually don't have anything specific I want to look at. I'm kind of not really using the tool. I am working with teachers who will be using. So my role is support.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen then. And I think in Turnitin Feedback Studio, there are a number of things that I wasn't able to get into earlier on some of the earlier sessions that I think, get into a bit here. We did record the first two sessions today, and in those sessions, I covered some things more on the fundamental level of assignment creation in both our website directly and through Moodle. Now I'm logged in here. I'm logged in, going to share my screen. I'm logged in to Turnitin directly. And I'm in one of my older courses where I had a number of different assignment types. So here in my class, let me just shift over to instructor view. This was a student view. You can toggle between student and instructor here in the upper right. I also have administrator access here, so you can see that showing up as well. We'll give this just a second to shift over. Okay. And I have a number of classes. I think I'll just jump into this pre-existing. So earlier I talked about how to create an assignment, how you go ahead and add an assignment. I'm going to really quickly add another one and show how you would create a PureMark assignment now directly in Turnitin through our website. Earlier I showed how to do so in Moodle. Now I can show PureMark a bit from here. So the thing to remember with PureMark assignments and revision assignments when you're using Turnitin directly at Turnitin.com is that there always has to be a base assignment first. And once you have that base assignment, you can then create additional layers, so to speak. So now I have a base assignment, and I went through those settings earlier. However, if you wanted to create, say, a PureMark assignment, now that I have a base assignment in this course, you'll see that some additional options pop up. So the paper assignment, that's the base assignment, and you have to have that before you can have any of the others. Now that we have a base assignment, you'll see that we have the option for a PureMark assignment, a revision assignment, and a reflection assignment. So I'm going to go ahead and show how to create a PureMark assignment when logged in directly at Turnitin.com. When you do so, it'll ask you which base assignment you want to base the PureMark assignment on. So to do a peer review, you have to have something to review. So it's going to take papers submitted for the base assignment and review those for the peer review. So I'll go ahead and give it a title. And a description. And this appears a little bit different compared to what I showed in Moodle on the other session. So you can keep it anonymous or allow students to view author and reviewer names, or choose whether to allow students without a paper to review, set a point value, and determine whether you want full points to be automatically awarded or not. And then you set a different set of dates for the start and end of the peer review. Once you save and continue, it moves on to distribution. Right now it's set up so that PeerMark will automatically distribute. Similar to the workflow in Moodle, you can require self-review or have papers selected by the student. Now here, when we're in turnitin.com directly through the website, it'll tell you how many total reviews down below a student will have to do based on your selections. So if I set up automatic distribution by PeerMark, the student selecting the paper to review or requirement of self-review, right now we have 3 total reviews per student based on how I'm doing it. And then the questions takes us right to the PeerMark questions. Now you may have noticed if you were on the session earlier where we were in Moodle and we covered PeerMark, where there was an additional option for manual pairing. The manual pairing option was available through the integration, but not available any longer at Turnitin.com. So that's one key difference is for manual pairing, where an instructor would choose the students who would review each other's papers. That's no longer an option. So that's something to remember. Also, let's see here. If we wanted to add questions from a library, this particular library I think did not have any questions. So let me just go back to the previous step and choose a different library. Add question. There we go, sample library. I'll grab a few questions for the peer review. And then they display down below. Notice there's also a save to library option. So you saw that I had a library that didn't have any questions in it yet. I can also select some questions and save them to a new library. So you can go through the sample library, and if there are specific questions you think you might want to use again, you can save them to your own library too. So now we have a base assignment. Now we have a PeerMark assignment. Let's take a look at the revision assignment type. Now this would be for multiple drafts. In the second session today, we were in Moodle and we talked about how you can create different assignment parts. That would allow you to save multiple drafts without overwriting them. If you're using Turnitin Feedback Studio directly at Turnitin.com, the way to create multiple drafts and save each one would be to do a revision assignment after the base assignment. So maybe that base assignment would be the rough draft. The revision assignment would be a revision of that. So you would then go ahead and create your revision assignment based on the base assignment, which was the initial assignment we created. So it asks us which base assignment first, the point value, and then for the revision, you can set start date, due date, and post date. Another thing you may have noticed, there was no start date, due date, and post date, no 3-date option for the PeerMark assignment here. The reason that the PeerMark options are different through the integration than they are at Turnitin.com is because at Turnitin.com, we've simplified the process and taken out some steps. I'll go ahead and add some instructions. For the revision. And then we get into some settings. It gives you a few settings to adjust here. Just a couple for the revision. So it's taking settings from the base assignment. You can set a point value, set your dates, instructions. Then it gives you the ability to set how originality reports are generated, just one immediate, or an immediate report followed by the potential to do resubmissions that overwrite, or doing the originality report on the due date. So you can adjust that and make it different from the base assignment here. And then you can set whether or not students can see the originality reports and set that differently from the base assignment if you want to. So there are a few key differences as far as how it works for the assignments. If you compare going through Moodle to going through Turnitin.com. There's another assignment type, if I were to create another assignment, called a reflection assignment. Now, this does not include an originality report. This cannot be marked up in GradeMark. This is for reflection, for students to just write about what they learned from the process of writing and offering feedback. This is helpful when we're talking about classes that emphasize the writing process. So I can set up the reflection assignment based on the base assignment so students can reflect on that experience and what they learned from it. You can adjust your set of dates here for start date, due date, and post date, and enter instructions if you have any special assignment instructions. So start date, due date, and post date all set. So now we have basically 4 different assignment types. Now, it is possible to submit on behalf of a student and Turnitin. Something else to keep in mind, instructors can submit multiple files on behalf of students. They can also do a zip file upload if they wanted to do a zip file upload of many papers at once. If I did a multiple file upload, I would have to set up the file specifically so that everything is loaded properly. And it gives you some guidance. Each file must be less than 40 megabytes, at least 20 words of text, maximum paper length is 400 pages. That's true for all the assignment types. So these would apply to everything as far as the standards for a paper and what needs to be included as far as the amount of text and the limits, and then the file types allowed. Then, when it's time to choose a file, I can choose the file to submit. We'll upload that file, and then you can enter the student name. Then I can go ahead and do the same thing again. A multiple file upload will allow me to submit one at a time on behalf of students. Once I'm done with that, I click upload all, then I make sure and confirm everything is as I want it to be. If not, I can go back. I hit submit, and then it redirects me back to the inbox. Again, sometimes it takes a minute or two for the similarity report to generate, and then we'll see that score populated here in the similarity column. So if I go back to assignments, we can now see that one student has submitted. So we'll give that a moment. There's another entry here, another link you can click for quick mark breakdown. This will give you a breakdown of quick marks for the assignment. Since I haven't used any yet for this assignment, right now it's blank, but that's something we could look at. I'll give this just a second to shift screens. We can take a look at an existing paper. And for this one, we'll go ahead and open it up. I'll just add a few quick marks here real quick. Just drag and drop them onto the paper quickly. I'm not putting too much thought into that process at the moment. And I can go ahead and I can grade it. maybe add another comment too, like a bubble comment, for example. Okay. So now that I've done the grading, we see that for the online grading report, we have some marks that have pushed through. Notice there are some subtabs here so that you can get a look at the number of marks, but it breaks it down for you by student. So I can see for this student, grade mark was used, 1 composition, 5 tied to commonly used quick marks, 1 punctuation, and 1 for format. And then you can click through and get the details. So I can see, okay, I'm missing comma. What's nice about this is you can take a look on an individual student level, break it down when I have a list of students to compare, and you have the ability to export the report. So that can give you some perspective on when it comes to quick marks that were added to a paper, which students maybe were struggling in some areas compared to others, or where they collectively may be struggling. This can give you some perspective on perhaps how to address things a little bit differently in the classroom. So imagine if I had multiple students here, we would have a list of students, and then we can compare in the columns whether or not there were some areas where there were some collective struggles, for example. If I wanted to export the report, you get a spreadsheet on that. Then I can get an idea based on what's displayed where some of the issues were. I'd have a list of students, the title of the paper. Here, it was a missing comma, for example. Or if I were to go to this one, keep in mind it's focusing on what's displayed. Now we have multiple columns and I can see the number of marks. So you can export this data out based on the assignment after you've gone in and graded it. After you've used the quick marks, you can then get this data and compile it, use the spreadsheet and edit it any way that you'd like, comparing your assignments after they've been graded to figure out which areas students may be struggling in. So the quick mark tool is good not just for providing feedback to students, but it's also really helpful in identifying trends that may be going on in your class and across classes too. So that was one example I wanted to show of how you can work with the grade mark report to compare and contrast some data that comes out of that. I wanted to go perhaps a little bit deeper when it comes to the originality report as well. So there were a number of things we looked at as far as drilling in. Also with ETS E-Rater. And with rubrics. So another thing to consider too with the rubrics is that you can access the rubrics and quick marks from Feedback Studio when you're viewing the paper. You can also view them during assignment creation. Something I had not delved into in the earlier sessions was grading forms, which are a little different from rubrics. With grading forms, you can enter criteria and descriptions, and it's a lot more simplified than the full rubric. So that's something that you can create from scratch and enable scoring on. You can also add criteria and remove criteria. This was a view that we had not looked at earlier. I could also create this and then download it for sharing. And similar to with rubrics, with grading forms, you can duplicate them and then edit the duplicate. Doing an upload would be a drag and drop. It's similar to the rubric formats with file types. You can do a .rbc file, XLS, and that's how it would work with rubrics. With grading forms, it has to be a .rbc file. The same limitations, though, would apply with the criteria titles. They must be 13 characters or less, a limit of 20 scale columns and 50 rows, and scoring can be included once the rubric is imported. Taking a look at an example spreadsheet, this is something I wanted to dive into deeper that I didn't get a chance to earlier today in the second session or the first session. This is what it looks like when you have a spreadsheet all set up. I've had the question before, sometimes teachers have rubrics that they've already created, and many times they're in Excel format. So thinking in terms of what you may want to do if you wanted to upload to turn it in without having to create it from scratch. As a teacher, you may find yourself editing an existing spreadsheet if you already had a rubric to use. So this is an example where we have each individual criterion and how you would lay it out. You would have the title and then the description, keeping in mind limitations with titles. So I would enter the titles across the top. In the first row, and then column A would have titles in the first column. Then you would set up your descriptions as far as where this would fall on the rubric. Now I'm going to keep that just so that we can compare and contrast a bit here. So here's what the rubric looks like when we're looking at it through Turnitin Feedback Studio. You have your columns and your rows, and this is how it's laid out. Row 1, column A, for criteria, each individual criterion title, and then descriptions are entered below, and then with your scales and point values. If we then compare that to the spreadsheet for the example rubric, you can get an idea here of what it needs to look like. If you had a spreadsheet and you already had a pre-existing rubric, this is an idea of, or an example of what it would look like in order to upload it. Row 1 for your titles for scales, column A for your criterion titles, and then field A1 would be blank. Have a question, can the rubric go from low to high, from left to right? Yes, that's been done before. I've seen that. I've seen some rubrics set up in that way. That's a good question. Something else that's kind of neat is when you do customized rubrics, how you can really make adjustments on the fly as far as how you want them to look. So if I were to jump back here, I want to get into some of the other styles of rubric that you can create based on that question. So I've been working mostly with the standard rubrics. However, if we wanted to get into the customized or qualitative rubrics, then you can really make a lot of adjustments and really customize it as you see fit. I'll give this a second to load. Okay, now I'm in as an instructor. And I want to go ahead and add an assignment and get into the rubric manager through this method. I'll give that a second to load. And into the optional settings. Okay, launch the rubric manager from here during assignment creation. So right now we're looking at the standard rubric. If I wanted to create a new one or duplicate, I could do that. So I could set up those points any way I want. I could have the point values go getting larger from left to right, or I could make that the reverse and have it 3 points here, 2 points here, and 1 point here. That's doable. And you could have the criterion set up any way you want to. This could be 3, this could be 4. So trying to put myself in your shoes, teachers could have individual preferences, sometimes that I'm not even thinking about. Another thing is you can have your weights set so that they're not necessarily the same. So if I have 4 individual criterion here, you see 1, 2, 3, 4 going up with the criteria. I could also set the weights differently if I wanted to. I could make this one weighted differently from the others. So you can customize that. So we're still working with the standard rubric. And you can have additional scales and additional criteria. So you notice these plus signs? I can add additional scales if I want, and add to the criteria too. And then I can just customize what they say any way I'd like. Sometimes I go into the Turnitin rubrics to look at examples, and that helps me gain some perspective on what rubrics can look like. So I'll jump into those in just a moment so we can look at some others. So these are easily customizable. If I go over to the customizable rubric, the custom rubric, then you can enter values directly in the cell. So I can have point values set any way that I want here. It's free for me to enter any way that I want as far as what the number of points would be. So you can get pretty crazy and creative with these. We're trying to make it so that it can be flexible based on your preferences. It is similar to how you can adjust an Excel spreadsheet in many ways too, yes. And then with the qualitative, it just simplifies things. You have titles and explanations, but not fields for direct point values. So if I were to go to our rubrics site from our community teaching tools, we can take a look at some examples. So for this theme analysis rubric, we have separate weights here for the criteria. So they're weighted a little bit differently. Organization and style at 20%, mechanics and content at 15%. Looking at the scales, we're focused on exceeding expectations down to does not meet expectations. And then the descriptions there. You'll notice for the persuasive paper rubric, the points go up as you go from left to right. And here we have some dramatically different weights here for criteria. So these can look quite different depending on how you want to do this. And if I jump ahead, we have page after page. This one looks even different here. We just have one row for criteria, but then some values here as far as what points constitute A, B, C, D to F. So they can be very simple or complex. And again, if you see a rubric that you like, it's very simple to take that rubric and import it. In fact, I can show that process right now. So let's say I do a search for Turnitin rubrics. I get to our community teaching tools and I see one that I'd really like to use. I would click on it to view it, click on the title. Then there's the RBC file I can download and the Word file. Just to give you an idea of what the Word file looks like, this is something that would be viewable and editable for your own use or if you wanted to print this out. Some teachers sometimes will take a rubric and want to print it out and hand it out to the class. the Word file would be helpful for that. So at our community teaching tools, we have rubrics that you can download and these sheets that you can hand out that really breaks everything down, as you can see with this. But the .rbc file is what can be imported into Turnitin. So now I have this one, 230. Jump back into Turnitin, and I'll jump into a course, and then we can add that one. So I defaulted to student here. Something else to keep in mind, as far as, you notice when I'm logging in here, it's defaulting to either student or instructor. That's something that you can change. It is possible to change it so that it defaults to whichever you like. But going back into one of my courses, I'll just jump into this one. If I was to add an assignment to bring the rubric in, I'll jump back into a rubric manager and we'll add this rubric. So if I launch the rubric manager, in the upper right-hand corner is where you can import or export. I would do import, select file, and then this one, load. There it is, 130. Now that we have that, I'd hit the arrow in the upper left-hand corner. So once you've selected the file, you need to go back to the upper left-hand corner to come back. Now that I've imported it, if I scroll down, you see all the rubrics listed, and then what I imported should be available. Similarly, if a colleague would like to utilize a rubric, the export is very simple. It just gives me the RBC file, and I can email that to them if they want to use it. Notice on this one too, look at how the percentages are different. With the weights, you can actually do like 16.6%, 16.7%. You can get pretty specific with these weights if you wanted to. So there's a lot of flexibility here with rubrics. And our community teaching tools has a lot to offer as far as rubrics are concerned. If I were to go back to the community teaching tools, I think there's some other things that we could take a look at here. So if I go to Turnitin.com and go to resources, notice that we have a number of different areas that can be pretty helpful, such as best practices, grading best practices, we have some videos here. Here's an example of a paper to download. And then specifically to K-12, there are some helpful things to read into here too. So we have some resources, and then this part of the community page also. In the educator spotlight, we have some stories here too. And some from your region as well. Looks like we have another question. Turnitin 101 for students tutorial videos. let's go over the support page a little bit. I think drilling into this in more detail could be helpful, just so that you're aware of some of the help resources that we have. So if you go to turnitin.com and you go to support, and again, thank you, a lot of good questions here leading me in a good direction. For this session, I really wanted to be free-flowing and focus on what would be most helpful for whoever's attending for this session, almost like an office hours. But if you go to support, there is an area where you can look at all the system requirements as well as the system status. If you go down to training, there is student training, instructor training, administrator training listed. If I go to student training, we have a lot of guides available for student guides, depending on what you're looking for. The student guides go through in detail registration, the student homepage, the assignment inbox, explaining all of this, confirming their submission, how they would view their report. This is something that you can send to them for them to review. But at the bottom of the table of contents, there's also a quick start training video for students. It's just 3.5 minutes long, and this is to help them get started. So there's a really short video, a quick start video that can be really helpful for students. And I think what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab that direct link and I'm going to put it in the chat. So there's a direct link to the video for students. I'll jump back here. To instructor training. These guides go into a lot of detail, and we have quick start training videos for instructors. So with the quick start guide, if I look at the table of contents, we have multiple videos for instructors. I'm going to drop this link, this direct link, into the chat as well. So getting started, setting up and submitting assignments, evaluating originality reports, and providing grading and feedback. Evaluating originality reports is one that tends to be pretty popular. So if you wanted to just focus on that, accessing the originality report, interpreting it, and manipulating the match breakdown, I went through a lot of this in session 1 and some in session 2. This video, in just a very quick, short video, goes through a lot of those steps as well. So just to review, if I go to turnitin.com, and we go to the support link, there are system requirements, and then down under training, there's instructor training and student training. If I go to instructor training, you have the full guide, which gives you very detailed specifics. And you can jump ahead to wherever you need to be in the table of contents. Then the quick start training videos are at the bottom. Quick start, setting up assignments, evaluating originality reports, and the feedback and grading piece. So that support link is really helpful. A couple other things, managing your libraries. In the Libraries tab, when you're logged in as an instructor, you'll notice as you start creating assignments, you'll have a library of assignments that's displayed too. With the QuickMark Manager, you can manage quick marks from here. And I mentioned in an earlier session that the easiest way to create a quick mark is usually to just create a comment while you're in the process of commenting on a paper and then convert it to a quick mark. But if you wanted to create a new set from here, not in the context of viewing a paper or while you're creating an assignment, if I were to click the plus sign here, I can create a new set of quick marks. And then click the plus sign to create the marks. And it's really that simple when you create your quick marks. Then when you have a list of quick marks, you just click on them to see the descriptions, and it was very easy to add a description. With the Rubric Manager, you can do the same thing, creating rubrics here outside of the context of viewing a paper or creating an assignment in the assignment creation workflow. You can just go to your Libraries tab and start creating quick marks in rubrics. And peer mark questions have all your libraries in one place. So here's the sample library that we've looked at before in peer mark assignment setup in the prior sessions. This library I did not add a title to. And here's one that had 2 questions in it. If I go to more actions, I can actually copy a library or delete a library. If I go to view or edit, I can then proceed adding questions. So maybe I want a free response question. Set a minimum answer length. It's pretty simple. With free response, or go back, or with a scale question. You can set your scale size up to 5. Etc. You can play around with this, but it's very easy to add your questions to the library. Under the Preferences tab, this is something that I'd covered before as far as which products are enabled, whether or not you even have peer market set up, whether or not you use the grammar check, the discussion boards. Under User Info at the top, though, under that tab, this is where you can set your default user type. So it was defaulting to student to me. I can flip it to instructor, so that's the default. There's some other things that you can adjust here as far as the settings as it applies to your account. If you want email updates, you can set that. Have a class homepage link and a URL. If you want it to automatically, as far as the file download format, when you download a file, do you want it to be the original format or do you want it to be a PDF? How many items do you want displayed per page? It can be 10, 25, 50, 100, or even 1,000. Quick submit is an option if you just want to quickly submit a file to get an originality report. You can turn that on or off. And your default submission type, single file upload is usually what's popularly preferred. But if you find you're using multiple file upload, cut and paste, or zip file upload, you can set those defaults too. That was something else that I wanted to get into a little bit more, was with user info. You can make some adjustments to your user information and your account settings. Jumping back to my classes. You see the quick submit option too, actually. If I wanted to adjust things and do a quick submit, I just hit the submit button to submit a paper and get a quick response. That was an older one. Let me jump into a more current, a course that's still live. If I could. I had quite a few in here. Just hit submit. What do I want to compare against? So quick submit is just to get a really quick report. And then you do your file upload. Put in the name, submit it. And then I do a confirmation. And I go to my assignment inbox. So I just quickly submitted paper so that I could get an originality report under quick submit. You can toggle between institutions if you're part of more than one. You will probably just have one in the dropdown, which will simplify it. You can also change your view too. New papers, viewed, marked, or all papers. So just wanted to mention, as far as the earlier sessions are concerned, I went into PureMark in far more detail in session 2 with Moodle. And in session 1, where we're focused on Feedback Studio, I used a very linear approach for assignment creation. Here for this one, we looked at some of the other assignment types just to give you some perspective on those. Looked at how PureMark is different in this interface directly through Turnitin as opposed to through Moodle, and touched on just quickly some of the other options and functionalities such as quick submit and what it's like to adjust your user settings. But we'll make the sessions available via Google Drive within the next few days. That way you can revisit. The first 2 I'll probably keep in their entirety. This one I may edit a little bit. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time today. Thank you.